I do just want to share my story of Vampire Hunter D.
Oh yeah, sure.
So obviously, this one came out in 1985, and it came out December 22nd, I believe, 1985. So, in shoot life, I was just a little kid, right? Just a couple months old.
Yeah.
So I did actually, and it actually, to tell you the truth, it didn't actually get imported to America in English, like dubbed, until about 1992. So even if we were rocking in the 80s, but if we wanted to watch this, it had to be in Japanese, and that might be a little hard for us. I might have to get a translator to tell us what's going on. But so I remember watching. I don't remember the exact point I watched Vampire Hunter D, but I think it was towards like 95 or 96. My brother started to get really into like anime. All right. And he would, show me different animes. And I remember my first encounter, though, with like vampires was playing Super Castlevania. Right. For the Super Nintendo. I love that game. I played it all the time. And of course, Castlevania has like Dracula and all. Castlevania and Vampire Hunter D very similar. All right. When it comes to the, we're fighting a vampire, and the vampire has a bunch of minions. They're like demon creatures and mutant creatures as well too. They're similar, and they're vastly different if you actually read the Vampire Hunter D manga. But I remember seeing that, playing that video game and loving it. And I believe during this time it was either the Sci-Fi Channel or what would become the Sci-Fi Channel. They had this is before like Toonami and all that shit, when they would play a bunch of stuff. It was a block, like it was very late at night. Like it had to be like around like 11 to like maybe 2 a.m. They would show like old animes from the 80s and shit, or 80s, early 90s. All right. And I remember recording it on the VCR, brother, overnight, the catch up of them. And they would have stuff like Galaxy Express.
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
Yeah, Galaxy Express would be on there. Maybe some, they had, they showed like Evangelion on there, I believe. But I remember watching this one, Vampire Hunter D, from that, what that channel was. And I remember the beginning scene where you see the castle and the blood moon behind it. I vividly remember that in my brain. And I remember, when our boy Count Marcus, all right, over here, I remember when he popped up with his fangs, and I was just burnt into my head as a youngster because I fell in love with the whole movie, the whole concept, the whole vampire lore and of it. And it became right then and there one of my favorite, like, anime movies. Like anytime anybody like brings up, oh, I seen this anime, I always bring up Vampire Hunter D because, I think it's a very cool, like, it's just a really cool story. It's like a really cool fantasy, gothic, dark story. That when I was doing some of my research was kind of like new for the time. It's kind of like almost ahead of its time when it comes to the actual like concept of how they filmed it and stuff. Because we had stuff, and when I was doing some of the research, you had like Gundam was like popular. You know what I mean? Which is a great show. Yes. You had like Macross is popular. This is a couple years before Dragon Ball would come out and stuff. This is more stuff that you can like market, towards kids, and I would say they're all family friendly and stuff. But they're a little bit more, normal, goofy, good ideas and stuff. But then you get this, you know what I mean? This is like, bro, this one was wild too, man. Because like, I mean, I don't know what they were dressing, but like this girl, what she would just, we're just showing panties. You know what I mean? That's just what we're doing here. Okay. Like this guy was like mixing like the 80s, rock and roll style with it. And just like this, like mixture between like science fiction, which is really popular in the 80s. You know what I mean? Because, Star Wars and, we talked about that stuff on here. Big science fiction, obviously it's a time for like merchandising and stuff is big in the 80s as well too. Same thing within Japan. And then, got the vampire lore on there too. So I just think it's like a perfect mixture of like a lot of like different elements that this film like kind of possesses with a really interesting period, like 1985. You know what I mean? So it's kind of a cool little concept there. But yeah, I mean, I always, I just remember seeing it as a youngster, and I just fell in love with this movie. And of course, when the its sequel came out, Bloodlust, that came out more towards the 2001s. I mean, when it comes to the animation on Bloodlust, I mean, it is vastly different than what you're going to be watching on this movie. I mean, it's like night and day.
Oh, yeah.
Like, Bloodlust is pretty much, like, Bloodlust looks better to me, animated, than the newer Castlevanias that came out on Netflix. And if you watch Bloodlust, like, this thing was made around 2000, 2001. I mean, you can tell that the newer Castlevanias off Netflix, I mean, they had to rip off, like, like half the stuff that this Vampire Hunter D movie did. But, really quick, I haven't read, like, all of the mangas before, but I do know a little bit about, like, the side history, and I'll add that in as we're doing the review and stuff, because, the movie that we're doing, this one is, there's many books. I think there's about, like, 12 books, maybe? There might be less. But this story only kind of, like, covers, like, the first one or two, when it comes to the book. So we don't get into too much about the lore, but there's a shit ton of, like, there's like a big whole universe when it comes to like the Vampire Hunter D and stuff, which is pretty crazy. So
yeah, so what I read was that they were before. So there are some Vampire Hunter D manga, but before that they were created as light novels, which are like illustrated young adult books, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
But they were geared toward like older teenagers and 20-year-olds, like people in their 20s or whatever.
Yeah.
So they would, there's like, I had read somewhere there's like 40 of them altogether.
Oh, okay. Nice. Yeah.
So there's quite a few.
Yeah. Yeah. I knew there was a lot. And then they did make it into a bigger like book form, kind of like they do with like different animes, where they'll have like a big book and have like half the chapters in it, like 1 through 10 or whatever. So, but so I'm like you, Allison, a little bit. I'm not the biggest anime fan, also like I don't love like every little thing that anime like punches out at me. Like I don't even remember watching like a newer anime. Like the only anime I follow, and I'm pretty sure I talked about this a little bit on the podcast before, but the only anime I pretty much ever follow, and I did watch all of the new remakes of the TV show, was Rurouni Kenshin. Like that would probably
but that's not even new though.
Yeah, that's not new at all. But they did make a they do like a redo of the TV show that recently aired. All right.
Really? Yeah. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it's on like Crunchyroll. Is that what it is?
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's on there.
So maybe I'll check that out.
You should. It's
they
good.
I guess it's like, so they just they're doing all those shows that had a lot of filler. I guess they're reanimating it so that it's more
yes
true to what the manga was.
Yes. So pretty much this is obviously higher animation. Okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a little bit different voice actors in this one because the other one was made in like the 90s. And yes, this one follows the manga more closely. So Kenshin didn't really have too many fillers. It had like a little bit of it, but it didn't have like too many fillers. But they did redo a couple of the story very lightly in the 90s anime. But pretty much, like this is like so far they remade the whole first half and they got a little bit into the second half. So the newer one ends with the Saito fight with Kenshin. That's where the newer one ends, and then they're trying to make a season 2, which is obviously going to be the Shishio arc. And of course, hopefully, if it makes it, how the ratings are good, we'll finally get the Inishi arc, and I'll be a happy man. But that would be like the only anime I actually like follow, and like I'm like pretty much dedicated to. Not counting the author's past. I won't get into all that with him being a horrible person. But I kind of do follow Dragon Ball Z, but like I watched that like new one of like Piccolo and Gohan, and I thought that shit was corny as fuck. But I heard that there's some cool Dragon Ball Z stuff that still happens. So, but that would be like only. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's like some good ones out there. Like I've heard there's actually some pretty good like horror, animes out there like Death Note or Chainsaw Man or something. I know there's some good ones out there, but I'm not the biggest like follower of it. But back in the day, brother, you know what I mean? Like I ran the anime train pretty hard. I was doing like Evangelion, Akira, Ghost in the Shell. You know what I mean? All the classics. So Tenchi Muyo, Guyver was one of my favorites. The guy, brother. Well, one day, I think I might have asked you before, but like, have you ever seen like the Guyver like live action movie before?
With Mark Hamill? Yeah.
Oh my God, brother, that movie is insane. And seeing Mark Hamill turn into some sort of like weird creature. I mean, come on now. What more do you need in your life?
No more. That's all you need in your whole life.
Well, that movie is wild, man. Like, what were I think we talked about that before. Like, I would like, everybody would be asking like Mark Hamill, like, Star Wars questions. I would just focus on that film and ask him all this stuff.
Like, he probably asked about the Guyver.
Yeah, the Guyver.
Like why?
Yeah, why? What is going on here? Like, he's like, I don't. He probably wouldn't even remember any of that shit. But yeah, like, I was, like I said, a big anime fan. Like, I was watching, Dragon Ball before, like, even like really hit the United States hard. I did the same thing with Naruto. I watched that shit, all that stuff before it really hit hard. But yeah, I just don't really follow it nowadays. But here and there, I'll watch maybe like an anime or two if I hear it's good. I've heard Attack on Titans is good. I've heard about that. So.
Yeah.